Now that we have our player able to actually jump in code, we also want to trigger an animation to play so that we get a little bit more visual feedback when we actually are jumping. So to do that, what we want to do is select our alien game object, and we're going to look for the component called the animator. And if it's closed like this, you can just click on the little arrow and expand it. What we want to do is double click on where it says alien in the controller variable. So if we double click on that, that's going to open up what's called the animation state machine. And what you'll see here are a few of what are called nodes. Each of these nodes represents an animation that our player does while they're moving around. So we have an idle animation, that is the pose where our character isn't moving and he just kind of stands and sways a little bit. The run animation, which plays, when we're running. And then we have our jump animation. So our jump animation isn't currently attached to anything by a transition, which means it won't play. Transitions are these little arrows that go between the nodes, and those are what control whether or not an animation will play. These transitions are triggered by what are known as parameters. And on the left side here, you'll see a little window on the side where it says layers. Next to that, we see one that's called parameters. And if we click that, right now we have one parameter called running. That running parameter is a Boolean value, so it can be true or false. And if you select one of these two transitions, under conditions here, you'll see running listed, and then it has a value either false or true. What that means, and if I zoom in with my scroll wheel to get a little closer here, you can tell which direction the transition is going by the little arrow in the middle. So in this case, I have the transition from run to idle selected. And what this means is that when running is set to false, the run animation will transition back to the idle animation. The one going in the opposite direction has the opposite value, or if we select it, you'll see if running is set to true, we'll go from idle to run. And these transitions are only between each other. This entry node and the transition from it to idle tells our animator that when the game starts, we want to start in that idle animation state. For jump, we want to be able to go to jump from any of our states. So what we will actually do is create a transition from the any state to our jump. So to do that, what we can do is right click on the any state node and hit make transition and go up and select jump. And you'll notice when you put your mouse over the jump node, it'll snap right to it. Once it snaps to it, you can just click right on it and that will create our transition. What we want to do then is go to the parameters tab, hit this little plus button, and then select the trigger option. So running is a Boolean value because we could be running for a long period of time, but we want the jump animation to be done by a trigger because we only want it to play once when we are pressing that space button. So trigger is a parameter that will only happen one time and turn itself off when it's done. And we're going to call this jump. So you'll name that jump, and if the name gets incorrect, you can just right click it and hit delete and create a new one and then type jump there. Now we want to select our transition here and go to the conditions list, hit the plus button, and then on the drop down on the left where it says running, we can select jump. Finally, what we want to do is right click on our jump state, hit make transition again, and then transition down to idle. This is because when the jump animation stops playing, it has to tell us, or we have to tell it, what animation to go back to. So we can tell it to go back to idle, and from there it will determine if it needs to be running or jumping.